growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Cheat Code Podcast. Today, I've got a very special person with me, not only a previous coworker, but a friend, Mr. Derek Grant. Derek, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Super excited to have the opportunity to chat with this great ecosystem startup founder.
And so Derek is just recently went over to run sales over at AdPipe, and previously worked for, I think, maybe 8 years over at Salesloft, running market strategy, commercial sales, account management, SDRs, really did it all. And previously before that, was able to grow the Pardot sales organization, which was then acquired by ExactTarget and eventually. An amazing track record, and I had the pleasure of being with you for many.
That's right. I remember I joined Salesloft. You all had you had taken the world over with prospect or unstructured data, being able to get names right out of LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn didn't get very happy about that. And then it was your idea of a sales workflow engine that really became and is now the core of Salesloft front filtering and sales engagement. And so those were incredible days. I still remember our $1 million party. So I joined right after we'd made $1 million in cadence revenue. They'd say the first $1 million's hard to make, so I took it right after.
But that was the first and last party they let me plan.
You know what? It was a good one though. It'll go down in the Hall of Fame.
It was Brian Culler and I, our director of engineering and myself, were tasked with creating a party. And it was a fun one. So Derek, I know I've seen you do a lot of amazing things to grow organizations. I know that you are such an authentic leader. I've always said this about you, but 99% of the people that have worked for you before would likely take a bullet for you. And I think you would do the same for them. And so it was always inspiring to see. And I know that one of the ways that you were able to accomplish that level of trust is through setting the right expectations from the ground up, not only from the rep side, but also at the executive level. And then validating that and tracking it through data. I'd love to hear some of the methodologies and strategies there, why it's important.
I will tell you that we're a big believer in God we trust, all others bring data. I was thinking back to my early Pardot days, a great manager for us at the time who is now a CEO at a company. I remember he used to walk into the office and say, I think, and I'd be like, turn it back around. I don't want to hear what you think. Come back with what you can prove. What do you know to be true? And so that's always been an important part for us. But, as I think about the importance of expectation settings, particularly in startups, deals are lumpy, and deals are not things that happen each and every day in a lot of startups, particularly if you're selling to enterprise and not running ELG type of motion. And so, we all want the lagging indicator of revenue. There's a lot of things that happen before that. And so just optimizing for the outcome and not the work and the ingredients that are required to get up to that outcome, I feel like is a bit of a miss. I've said for years that one of the number one thing that a sales manager can do to get a rep fired, pay attention. Because when they do tune in, suddenly their boss is happening like, hey, so-and-so hasn't done a lot. They haven't booked anything. Then it's all hands on deck. There's this sort of frenetic hand waving, and generally it's too late. And had you intervened earlier, you might have been able to have figured out what it was that was important. And so I've been a big believer in leading indicators. And for us, leading indicators are really only 6. When everything's important, nothing is important. And those 6 things are number of emails, which I don't put a lot of credence in that metric. I track it just because it is one of the communication channels. But with platforms like Salesloft or Outreach, it's sending out a ton of email from a rep is not particularly special. But I track that. I track calls, conversations, opportunities created, booked, and revenue closed. And when you think about that sort of waterfall and you track it weekly, it helps you identify trends. It helps you identify individual gaps in reps. And it allows your executives to see that there's a lot that goes on prior to that magical moment where ink hits paper and the contract gets signed.
That's right.
Yeah. So you think it's interesting. You talked a little bit about, data and setting expectations through what you know to be true versus what you think or feel.
And as you likely know with your seller track record, sellers run the gamut in terms of their personality, right? You get the more engineering, process-driven types, and you got the cowboys on the other end.
That's right.
Do you find that that's your secret sauce? Because, Belichick didn't coach Brady the same way he coached number 53 on the roster. So how do you use that to modify and adjust your coaching?
So one of the big things I think about is I don't ever want to be somebody who runs a call center. And so when I measure calls and I measure emails, it's really a means to an end. And what I mean by that is really the thing that I look at weekly is how many did you create? And I have an expectation. I have a stated expectation that I expect 2 ops per week. That is, I am a knuckle dragger in that way. I've been pro-Madden man in sales management for a very long time. And look, it's possible for an established AE to get 2 meetings a week. I just don't, I don't find any sort of gap in that logic. And so if they miss that, then we start looking up. And if you didn't do the work and you didn't get to the number, now we have a problem. But really at the end of the day, I like to just treat everybody, look, we all need pipeline. We're all on a journey to create pipeline. We can't win deals if we're not in. And so as long as the pipeline number is what I'm looking for, I generally don't care kind of how you got there. I mean, clearly we don't want bats and blasts, like, ruin our domain reputation, sort of emailing. But for the most part, if a rep is stronger on the phone, stronger on email, a better social seller, I don't want to micromanage. I just want the outcome, right? Those activities are means to an end to the outcome that I'm looking for. And so, but I do treat everyone the same. And I'll tell you, Josh, really interesting story. So I'm 5 weeks here. And we have a really stellar long-time rep. And I'll tell you, one of the things that scared me, and I probably a lot of people don't talk about their fears on this podcast, but if I can put my feet up on the sofa and you can ask me to tell you all about my fears, one thing was that he wouldn't come along, right? Because it is really hard when your number one rep, you got fire him, right? That person has the ability to fight town hall. What I would say is that I'm super proud of him and our other reps who existed pre me coming in. They have come alongside, and they've been part of the solution. And when they do that, then it makes it a lot easier to hold everyone to the same.
Brings up a good segue. How do you introduce these expectations? What's the tactics and the methodologies that you're using in order to kind of communicate these to the team and then make sure that they have a reporting structure that can validate it as well?
Yeah, so great question. So I love natural experiment. Natural experiment for the best. And I'll give any of those who have not ever done this experiment, I recommend you do it. We're in the getting into the fall. I know we're still sort of the dog days of summer, but the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I'm going to give you a really easy natural experiment, which is this. Say, hey, look, you got to make 50 calls. As soon as you hit your 50 calls today, you can go. You can go. And they're out of there by 11 a.m. It's the thing. I think you had a little bit of focus, man. Now, second week of December, they can't get to it in a whole day. And you're like, wait. But when you were getting to go home early, you got there by lunch. So I don't believe that you can't do this. Well, we had a natural experiment here. I walked in on week 1 and I didn't say a word. And I didn't set any expectations, just like really happy to be here. And I just watched. And as I was watching, what I saw was that a team of 3 ramp sellers made a total of 83 total calls between SDR and AE. And I didn't say anything. I didn't make a big deal about it. And on Monday, I didn't set my expectations. This was a natural experiment. And here's what I can tell you. That ain't it. So here are my expectations. And I laid out the expectations. And what I took was historical connect rate, historical close rate, historical ASP. And I said, this is what a day needs to look like in order for you to be successful here. And so we set expectations not arbitrarily. As a matter of fact, I think my expectation on the call side are a little low, but the numbers work. The math rolls up as you're bottoming up into it. Like they should be able to get there on a lower number of calls. And so I'm pretty excited about that. But we watched what was happening. Then I set my expectations in week 2. And then what I said is every week we will start our sales meeting off with metrics, both team and individual. And everyone knows the rule. And so know that you're gonna have your number up in front of your peers. So if you want to be the person who's having to answer some really uncomfortable questions in front of your peers, by all means, fight town hall, do whatever you want. But know that we're going to talk about it, and know that we will identify people who didn't get there, and know that we're going to have a remediation, and we're going to try and understand. And everyone gets a mulligan, right? But don't start it this early. But it's only week 2. I hope you're here for a long time. And so we just made metrics an important piece. We also do a Tuesday, Thursday stand-up. So Monday, we talk about the trailing lead metrics. Tuesday, we talk about metrics. Thursday, we talk about metrics. And so we're focused on, and really what we talk about in Tuesday and Thursday is op creation. But you can see if you haven't hung one on the board yet, then it's going to be your metrics that are getting looked at. And so I've seen people kind of come along and do it willingly. So it's actually been pretty nice, particularly with the old folks. Come on, but yeah, it just metrics everywhere, same metrics, not 100 metrics, 6 metrics, and those 6 metrics get addressed all the time. And so that's the way that we sort of institutionalize those into the business.
Yeah, I think those are really important, Derek. And, you know, setting those benchmarks and those expectations around some hard, tangible things are really important. If you think about through the lens of the founders that Sean and I are working with a lot, this is really early stage, right? And sometimes these are the first sales hires they're making. Yep. And they don't have any experience other than themselves going out and evangelizing their product that they created, right? Yep. So what would you tell them? Like, how do they take a deep breath, take a step back, and start to lay the groundwork for what even the expectations of the sales process should be, how you define an opportunity, what metrics we should be looking at? I know you talked about a little bit of that, but like, put yourselves in the shoes of that early stage founder who like needs to wrap their head around, how do I set expectations? Now I've hired a salesperson.
So I've had the opportunity to work with 2 organizations that have been pretty heavily founder-led sales when I got there. The first, I did a really poor job at and was not long for that position. And that's one of those deals where it wasn't right or wrong, wasn't good or bad. They're not terrible, I'm not all. It was just a fit at that point. And so it's been 8 months. So they did a great tech company with some really impressive tech. But now, you know, the founder was able to tell stories I couldn't tell, and they were able to make commitments I couldn't make. And so here at AdPipe, one of the things that we're doing is we are trying to gracefully push our founder, CEO, who is an exceptional sales rep, push him out of the limelight and into more of a supporting role. So what we're thinking about, I'll give you a good example. I've done 2 demo certs this week. So we're certifying reps on demos. We're doing Dexter. And so what we'd like is that the executive can be there for executive alignment. They can be there for a uniquely technical question. They can be there for a product commitment, but they should be ancillary. And we're just pushing Andrew further and further back. And we're taking the responsibilities and moving them from his plate to the reps, but we're doing it. It's taken a lot. It's taken, 4 weeks as we continue to prove we know what we're doing, what we're talking about. And we don't want him out by any stretch. We want him exceptional, but we don't want him to be implicated for 90% of the meeting. We want our sellers to be the people who are implicated. So that's been one of the really interesting things. I think that when you're coming from a founder-led sales perspective, you have to sort of understand that you have got an unfair advantage as the founder. And the story is your story. You found this unique use case that your technology now solved. And so just know that no seller's going to be able to do it as good as you can. What we do want to do is we want to capture all those stories. Those stories are really magical to be able to have. And for the sellers to be able, great sellers initially are great parents. They repeat things really well. If we can institutionalize those stories, that's a really good thing. And then it's make sure the founder is still involved, but the founder's role, and what I hope is sort of as we're getting into Q4, that he'll be able to pick the meetings he goes to, as opposed to feeling this need to be on a lot of the strategic meetings. So that's really what we're aiming toward, but it's going to take time and trust being built on both.
I'm loving that certification concept. I feel like that's a forcing function for the founder to take a step back and say, hey, all right, really boil it down. Like what are you doing that's working, and formalize, and then make them have a checklist of this is what certification that I hadn't thought of that. I think it's fantastic.
Can I tell you that we use Salesloft conversation intelligence, but Gong is great for this as well. Just the ability to go back. You don't necessarily have to be in the call, but just go back and listen to the meat of 5 or 6 calls, and you'll start to find this critical path. You'll see that there are a lot of similarities between them, and then it's just simply merging those down into what you think the idealized flow is. We call it Harvard Tour. No meeting ever goes like that, but it is at least like if someone were to not ask any questions and they were a perfect fit and we were just cruising, this is what it would look. And so, we want them all to at least have a walkabout amount of sense on that, because that's really important to build the trust. So our founder doesn't feel like he's got to go in and sort of play hero ball on every deal.
It reminds me, so remember back in the early days at Salesloft, Kyle, our CEO, was trying to enable the frontline sellers to be able to tell the same story that of our mission and what we were trying to accomplish and the way that he told it. Kyle was very gifted at being able to storytell. And he would go, I think once or twice a week, he would just record himself, on like a selfie camera or whatever. And he would tell a story. It was like a 2 or 3 minute clip. He'd put it into a Google Drive and then it would be shared with everybody. And so people could they were very digestible and it was really easy to do, but they were very compelling stories. And so that was at scale. That was a way for us to enable those sellers. Was there anything else that you implemented on the rep side, maybe for the SDRs or for the AEs in order to help them with that?
So we brought it more down to text. And so, for us, it's getting those stories and moving them into text. We hired a couple of Salesloft alum, Brett Lang and Rachel Chaw. And one of the things that Brett did in week 1, and remember, in the early stages, what you're going to have in the future is going to be awesome. What you have right now, nothing. And so it's like, all right, he's like, well, what are the stories? I'm like, well, go into the CI and listen to the stories. And you write those down. I'm working on the disco questions, and we were basically tag teaming it, but it was the idea of getting those stories out so that we could just anecdotes that get used pretty regularly. And so it was literally just going in and when we talk about some of these metrics and things like that, you may say, boy, where do I even start? We're Spartan. We're just a few of us. The best time to grow a tree is 20 years ago, and second best time is now. Like, look for opportunities to start. Make the reps do some of it, particularly these new reps. Like, make them go and figure out what it is that's important to the customer by listening to how you, the founder, have pitched the product. Like, put them get leverage from them. Put them in the critical paths for that. So I think that's a really important.
Yeah, I think getting those stories down is so critical. But then I think the second part of that is the triggers, because oftentimes they don't know how to apply them. Yeah. Right. It's like, okay, great. I've got this stable of stories, but then how am I using it? How am I telling it? Right. Is it objection handling? So how do you work that?
So as I said, week 5, so we're still continuing to do that, but that's a really big one, is looking for common objections and finding the handle to those and thinking about sort of where the setup story is. Really, the stories that we've been capturing are ones that our founder tells frequently on demos. A lot of times the setup, I find in the early days, it's the setup for why the company exists. And so us getting crisp on that and sort of our foundation story is really important. Years ago, so 2008, whenever I was at Pardot, we were going to work with an outsourced lead gen company. They gave us this list of all the things they needed to know to be able to completely represent our brand. And one was, what's your origin story? And that's such a powerful story. And if everybody in the business is not able to go in and tell some permutation, whether it be long or short, that's a myth. That's something that should be codified and should be something that your reps can say, well, here was the problem that we set out to solve. And those are usually words that you're pulling directly out of the founder's mouth, right out of their transcripts, right out of their call.
You got to have your why.
That's right. And try to tell you, we actually watched Simon Sinek start with the why. This is from 2005, if I recall correctly, 63 million views, but it's like, it is what you do can be easily replicated. Why you do it is something that is different. And so that's an exercise we're actually currently on, Sean. I love that you mentioned that. What's our bigger why? Because our technology can be fast followed, but our spirit and ethos is something that can help us stand.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Oftentimes we throw these slides together and say, don't jump on a call without your supporting slides, but then we don't go the next step and say, how do you actually talk to these, right? And that is what's behind the slide, the story, I love the ethos concept of the why of the founder, especially in these early stage companies.
That's right.
Like, you're so close to it. Like, you're sitting next to the founder. You need to be able to pull that enthusiasm and that passion and that evangelism from them and use it on those calls, because you're a nobody, right? This is a new company. If you might be going up against, it might be a David and Goliath story in every sales cycle. So you have to bring that, and that's going to be your differentiator.
You're exactly right. And for the founders out there, so at Salesloft, suddenly the mighty Salesforce got into our space with a really lively product. They got into the space. What was the very first thing I did? Go and read opening chapter of David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. And what you find is that size has its own unique issues that are associated with it. Goliath was large because they believe he had acromegaly, which causes pressure on the optic nerve. So he couldn't see the thing that was ultimately going to be the end of it. He couldn't pick it up from a distance. And so anytime you feel like you're going up against a juggernaut, go read that first chapter, and it's all about that size is great sometimes, not great other. And so it can give you some inspiration for those sort of sleepless nights.
So going back to founders and them feeling confident with net new hires, especially if they don't have very much sales DNA, how do you, or what advice would you give to them about trying to start feeding data and holding reps accountable, even though they may not always know what good looks like, and making sure that they are at least doing the right things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Oftentimes, really, the opportunity may take weeks or months or years in some cases, depending on the size that you're selling. And one of the things that I think founders need to get really crisp on is how to measure success pre-contract. What are the things that they expect them to do? And just be really specific, be really intentional about making sure they do. And then more of those deals will happen. And so, the things that I think about, particularly with enterprise sales reps, look at ops that are moving stages. Or all right, great, we got some disco meetings. Are they moving stage? Because it may be 6 more months before we're able to close. We may be in legal contracting hell. We may be in security purgatory, but are we seeing movement? Are we seeing deal velocity? Are we seeing ops being opened? Are we seeing ops being progressed? Are we seeing buying teams expand so that we're continuing to build out? Are we single or multi-threaded? It's like, those are the sorts of things to look at. And so I think a lot about op creation, just because we start there. But for a non-mid-market, for a true enterprise whale hunting initiative, it's not about velocity of opportunities they set up. There's a lot of moving parts of getting the right people under the tent and getting them bought in. And so I think depending on the segment that you serve, there's going to be different metrics, but just have some metrics. And a lot of times you know what they are in your butt. I can tell you our CEO, he's like, I was driving the other day and he's like, I just started calling people who I knew from the past just to be able to generate demand, which is great. It's like, he's out there and he's beating the bushes for us. That isn't necessarily something that maybe we would be able to do at that same scale, but it's all about continuing to get out there and get active. So he's helping us with that. But we can still look for advancement. We can look for close rates, DQ rates, win rates, which I know is a lagging indicator as well, but it's like, are things going better or worse than they were a quarter ago? Because that can be a pretty significant check engine light for you.
Yeah, I'm really loving op creation as a core metric, but I'm thinking even with a lot of the founders, and Sean knows where I'm going with this because we're dealing with it on the daily, defining an opportunity,
right?
Really setting the baseline, right? And that's a lens that a founder oftentimes doesn't have, especially as the sales evangelist role that they've been in. Like you said, they can do things that a seller can't do. You have to distill that down into, this is an opportunity. This is why it's an opportunity. And these are the stages and the exit and entry criteria that are required to even move that so you can measure it. And I think that's even a big speed bump in those early stages. Have you run through that at all?
We have, and I will tell you that, so, I'm still playing the new guy card. I think I have one more week. I think week 6 is when the new guy card officially gets Adam Blitzen used to always say at Pardot that a week is like a month is like a quarter, and a quarter is like a year. So when you're thinking about those things, so entry and exit stages, I look at being something that's really important, but probably not going to be the hill you're going to die on. Being able to be really defined. You can look at simple things like BANT and ANAM, BANT, budget authority, need, timeline. And a lot of times, quite honestly, the idea, the need, that's going to be a little squishy, because if you're selling something that is truly revolutionary, they don't know that they can't live another day with
A lot of education. Yeah.
That's right. And so the ANAM model replaces budget with money, because a true champion can steal budget. So yeah, we didn't know that this existed at the start of the year. Can this person at least get access to money? Or they're in marketing and maybe they run one less program and that funds your buy. And so I think just even simple, I think going simple early on as you think about opportunity qualification is probably the best thing. Yeah, when you get more mature and more sophisticated, and really this is when you're forecasting deals, you got to have entry and exit stages. You're probably want to use something like a medic or medpic to be able to make sure that, you cannot move from stage 4 to 5 without these 3 fields being detailed. You can't get the negotiation without the paper process being identified. You can't go from 1 to 2 without a metric that you think you can impact. And so those things happen. I don't think though they're not I have a list that is as long as your arm. It's not bubbling up toward the top of the list yet, but I agree with the importance of it. A buddy of mine who was in Salesforce, when I got the Salesforce, the guy said, all you got to do to be good at Salesforce is be good at forecasting, and that's really hard. And because there it is, it's like all the things that you need to know they're being treated the same way. So as you continue to get big, and particularly as you start thinking about forecasting, if every rep has got their own way of handling deals.
Talk to me about luck.
What's the old Abraham Lincolnism? Big believer in luck. Harder you work, the luckier you got. But it's one of those things where I try and think about repeatability. So could just Joe off the street be able to do this? And when you think about metrics, they shouldn't be metrics that only, if you've got an 80% conversion from conversation opportunity, like your best seller may be able to do that. Golden tongued, sell ice to an Eskimo. Most people can. And so when I think about it, if you set appropriate expectation, then, and if everyone runs that play, then everyone's going to have a similar amount of success. Mark Roberge talked about this in the sales acceleration formula. It's like you hire the same way, you onboard the same way, you hold them accountable the same way. You should expect very similar result sets that should come out of that. Then the question is, who's not running? So I have a totally different view on PIP than probably anybody else you've ever interviewed. And for founders, I'd challenge you all to consider this. And I shared this with an early stage founder. He called me an idiot, and I'm totally fine with that. So what I'm about to say may be the spiciest of hot takes, but PIP is not to work someone out. It's to work someone back in. If you think about it, you spent months interviewing. You then put them on ramp when they did next to nothing. And then you finally get them out. And at this point, you realize that they're not doing the job you want them to do. So the knee-jerk reaction to fire them then empties that seat. So there's no quota that can be born from that seat. Then you have to go interview again. Then you've got to wait for them to put in their 2 weeks. Then you've got to get them on staff. Then you've got a 90-day ramp period. And that seat can bear maybe 30% revenue through the span of a year if you cycle through a rep twice. Yeah, with 2 false starts. And so our thought process has always been that performance improvement is a way that it's not setting outrageous expectations, just setting the expectations that everyone has. And now HR is going to help make sure that you're doing, right? So that's an important piece. But we had a young man years and years ago. His name was Justin. I won't say his last name in case he's a big listener to the podcast, but you don't know who he is. So Justin got put on PIP, and during the process, Justin landed the plane on a deal. It was one that he'd been working for a long time. And by some miracle, this deal closed. But remember, I'm just looking for my regular expectations. That has to do with emails, calls, conversation, meetings scheduled, opportunities generated. Like I'm still just kind of looking at my normal stuff. So he lands the plane on the revenue and takes his feet up on the deck. He doesn't do anything. He's behaving exactly like it was when he got put on PIP to begin with. And so we kept reminding, hey, remember, from a PIP perspective, this is not a revenue only thing. This is a do what you're supposed to do on a daily basis. We're just asking you to do the things that everyone else around here does. And so PIP came and went, and he booked the revenue, and he had not done the work. We fired him. And the message that we gave to him was, this is not repeatable. And so if he was not learning to do the things necessary, he was 1 quarter away from being right back where we were. And so we felt like he got lucky with the deal. And he may say that it was all skill. What I can say is he wasn't on PIP because he was the most skilled seller that we had by a long time, right? And so we didn't feel like he was going to be able to build the foundational stuff to keep him in good state. And so we let him go that. And so that's an important idea, is that I think of PIP to keep them, but I also think of PIP as reinforcing the habits that you're going to need to be able to remain and be productive for a long term in the future. So love versus hard work. We'll take the hard work every time.
Yeah, it's a good take. I mean, to your point, it's so hard to get good people in the seat. And if you've already put in all that time, money, and effort, why do you want to rush to get them out? And then to your other point on PIP, I see too many PIPs where you introduce something new.
That's right.
Right.
That's a terrible idea.
It's up against your standard expectation. I like how you framed it around this. This is the expectation. We need to see you driving toward that expectation.
And back to the idea of something new. The reason that something new is being introduced in PIP, and I'll call back to something I said earlier, because the manager wasn't paying attention.
Right.
So suddenly they're like, oh my God, like it's not working, and now I need them to do this other thing that I just realized because I just started listening to calls or just started looking at Salesforce or whatever. And so, yeah, to your point, the initial expectation is generally because the manager has not been an accountability buddy with the person the entire time. They're showing up late. They haven't paid attention. And now all hands on deck.
Pure setup for failure.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And Derek, so you've spent most of your sales career on earlier stage tech companies, and had quite a few successful exits under your belt. When you come in there, how important is it for the CEO to prioritize sales and the C-suite in general, if there is a C-suite at that point? And what's your advice for going in how to coach them in order to prioritize sales?
So something that I would say was super interesting, and I mentioned that I had a stint that was a short stint, and it wasn't that the company was bad. It wasn't that I was suddenly not what was advertised. It was a fit issue. But one of the things was they had a culture that was all about engineering, building beautiful product, and beautiful product just sells itself. They had been at Google, and their theory was Google didn't have salespeople, and you could pull up LinkedIn and show there'd be thousands of Google Apps salespeople, Google Cloud salespeople. You could do all that. It didn't change their mind at all. So what I would tell you is if the founders don't value sales, that is an uphill climb. And I will tell you that when I went to that company, I was running from something. I was running from Salesforce. I was ready to get out of there. And you know what the truth of the matter was? Salesforce was great. I just sort of felt like, I just needed to go somewhere else. And so because I ran from something, I ran by some yellow, and I mean red, waving the flags at me. He's like, well, I remember having lunch with the founder, and he said, I think I have the team bought on the idea of having sales. And what I heard was he won't sell, and that's not at all what he said. Right. And so when you consider that they didn't have a sales first culture, and because they didn't have a sales first culture, I was a bad fit. Sellers were not necessarily a great fit at that point in that company. And so if execs don't embrace sales, I don't want to say run, not walk, but it's really hard to get them to change the perspective on that. And I get it. If you're a technical founder, salespeople, they are the waiters of the software world. This is an important thing for everyone who's I'm a non-technical, I have a communications degree, and I'm doing that now for free. What a dummy I am, right? But when you think about it, sales are the waiters of the technical world. They are not crazy technical. They don't make a ton, but the tips are great if they do a good job. And so finding an equilibrium where those folks are not considered to be second-class citizens, but really embraced as a part of the business, even if they're kind of the higher help. You hate to say that, but even if, I do think you need to embrace sales. And for companies who like it but maybe don't necessarily love it, I think there's the opportunity to impress upon them weekly metrics. And that's something, Sean, during the old days at Salesloft, we would do a weekly ops check-in every single week, right? And it's like, here's what we did. And I remembered, so at Salesloft, and for any of those of you watching and you're thinking about buying Salesloft, historically, we did 30% of our revenue in the last 3 days of every quarter. You think about that. That is backloading so much. But, it's like they did that because of the fact that they were salespeople, and they wanted to go out and they wanted to treat sort of the salespeople the same way. But what I said was in those meetings, 3 weeks an idiot, 1 week a genius, and probably neither is true, right? It wasn't that 3 weeks we, missing our number, spiking and way exceeding it. That just was the rhythm of our business. But being able to be accountable to metric, particularly when they don't look good, I think that's maybe one of the most important things. Because most sellers are going to find their months and quarters backloaded. I just think that's just the way that sales is. I mean, how many of you out there have run programs to try and get deals to close earlier? Extra money, they still don't close then? It's worse. And so go in at these meetings, say, here's what we did. And you know what? We wanted revenue this week. We didn't get it. We got 51 other weeks, but this maybe wasn't the week. So I think owning it and really being transparent about what you're measuring and how you're measuring and how the team's performing against it, I think that can help gain credibility with the C-suite whenever they're, lukewarm on sales. Like, that's a good way to be able to gain their at least respect.
Can't we just blame Salesforce for that? Teaching everybody how to buy at the end. Like, what?
Yeah. It is crazy. It is great. Yeah. And it's like, I think sellers have Stockholm syndrome. And so they're just like, do this to them because someone did it to me. But it works, you're liable to get a better discounted terms or whatever. I don't think I'm letting the the company dirty laundry out. I think this is everybody who sells stuff deals with this. And so it's like, sellers are trained. Salesforce is training them to behave this way.
It's insane. Yeah, one of the concepts I like to do is, you talked about your fit or lack of fit within that one organization. I do think there's a self-awareness thing. We, especially in tech, we talk about product market fit, but we don't talk about what I call seller market fit, right? Like you need to have some self-awareness in terms of where you're going to win, right? And I know that's hard. Like you said, if you're running from something or if you got laid off or you're in a tough situation, it can be really difficult, but it is something that needs to be evaluated hard. Like, I think I'm fucking great at sales, but you know what? I'm not going to win everywhere. And I know Detroit, right? Like there's certain environments where I know I'm not going to win. Heavy engineering led sale, I'm probably going to win. Like I'm not, my mind's not wired that way. So like, I just think there's a lot of reflection and self-awareness that on the seller side needs to get taken into account.
Some guidance that I give sellers, and I would challenge everyone within earshot of this to think about, is get really crisp on what you don't want to do. Because if you can get crisp on what you don't want to do, like I don't want to sell to engineering. I don't want to be on the road 3 weeks a month. I don't want to do smaller deals. Like whatever it is, get crisp on that, because that helps you the lens through which you can evaluate every opportunity proof and see if this is going to be a place of fulfilling. Sure, they're offering you, and of course, I don't know if you know anybody, every recruiter ever. I don't know if you know anyone like to make $700,000 this year.
Yeah, right.
But like I don't know if I'm a fit for them or them for me. And yeah, it's that lens to be able to help you qualify and more importantly qualify.
Yeah. I mean, I go in with the assumption that if you're in the right situation, and then
That's right.
like the rest of it doesn't really matter. So this has been awesome, Derek. I've enjoyed speaking with you. Big takeaways for me, obviously keep the metrics simple, right? Don't try, if you're measuring everything, you're measuring nothing. I think that's great. I'm personally the cert thing, putting some pressure on the founder to define what good looks like and be able to distill that down for a seller. I think that's fantastic. And then just the whole idea of sticking to your guns with those metrics. The PIP isn't an idea to bring something new. We're trying to help people along and stick to those expectations you set. Those are big takeaways for me. Sean, anything else you want to add?
No, it's just a pleasure. Always spending some time with you, Derek. Love your insight. We could go on for hours. If people want to follow you or get some more information on how to stay in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. So Derek at AdPipe.com. So DEREK. My parents told me one time they didn't put 2 R's or an ICK because they wanted to keep my name simple. Apparently I wasn't going to Harvard. You know what I mean? They weren't planning on me to be an astronaut, more like a garbage man. So, but whatever, just DEREK at AdPipe.com. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn, just at Derek Grant. And I certainly would love to have the opportunity to connect with each and every one of you.
Give us the AdPipe elevator.
Yeah, please.
It's 5 year. Let's give you some promo.
All right. I love it. So AdPipe. So AdPipe is a content activation platform that is designed to help marketers to discover, create, and share content. And we focus primarily on motion content. The problem that most B2B marketers encounter is they spend $50,000 on a 2-minute video. A 2-minute video goes up on YouTube. And then you look at the analytics and boy, is that depressing. 100 views, you spent $50,000. Like suddenly you're doing the math on per view. Like, well, that's not great. But what we know is that video, and also video that maybe even didn't make the main event, like the B-roll footage, it's got some goodness in it. And so the ability to use AI to go and look through all of your video library and search for a particular thing. An example would be maybe you want to run some sort of a end of summer sale for Jeep. And you can type in, Labor Day Jeep sale, Moab edition, and AI will find those. It will then slice you into exactly where you are, and allows you to take those pieces of content, adjust them for the endpoint, whether it be a square, whether it be landscape, whether it be more the vertical look, or the appropriate social networks to get them out there and to be able to drive eyeballs and hopefully revenue for your business. And so it's one of those things that our pricing is the price of one video. I always think back to just the price of a cup of coffee a day. Like, you're going to make you're going to sing the children.
Yeah, for $1.
That's right. It's like we need Sarah McLachlan playing in the background. That's it. Yeah, and y'all. No, it's not good. Not with my voice. But with that said, it's like you spend this money, you get poor analytics. Like, rather than just go out and make another anthem, let's just take what you have and take the goodness you already have, and be able to create breadcrumbs back to that, and to be able to create breadcrumbs back to your website, to your landing page, to your parts catalog, whatever it is that you're making, to be able to extend the life of those things. We know that motion outperforms still 12-1. If you can just use the eye test for your doom scrolling, what catches your eye? The other times. But for the most part, anything that's got motion in it, and that's why all social media is this now, that is something that's going to catch more eyeballs. And so that's really the space that we're playing.
Love it. Selling marketing to marketers. You're speaking my language.
That's right. And so you're talking about Lead MD. I was selling marketing automation to marketers. And so that's nice to get back to marketing. One of the things that I think is most interesting, one of my goals for every seller at Salesloft was to get a job on, because game recognizes game. And like if they go a pitch or a personalization or approach or whatever, I love that. It's a little different selling to marketers, because this isn't like impressing them with your game. If anything, they're maybe a little bit more suspicious of the selling, a little more suspicious of the dogs. That's right. So on some level, we're not trying to over-impress them with our sales chops. On some level, we're trying to let them know that we're, part of the revenue from. I don't know if you guys have read Jolt's Effect.
No.
Oh my God. Chapter 3, it is the Return of the Jedi of the Challenger series, Challenger Sale, Challenger Custom.
Yeah.
Incredible. But one of the things they're talking about is like, the traditional selling techniques are not working right now. And they're not working because people are indecisive. They're not unaware of this, how the suckiness of the status quo. And so like, it's almost like a softer peddling sort of thing. And I think marketers are really liking that we're not trying to hard close them. We're not like, oh, your current process sucks. You're losing $1 million a day or whatever the case may be. We're going in with things to be able to reduce the perceived risk. That one of the key tenets of the book is it's not a fear of missing out. It's a fear of messing up. And so how can we help turn down the risk in all of those? And so, for salespeople, it may be continue with the heavy-handed sales approach. I think we're finding that with marketers that it's more about letting them know that they're going to look like a rock star. And, and we've got all these controls to make sure that is true, and really reducing the risk for them. So we're pretty excited about this new way of selling that I think really resonates right now at this time in our economy.
Yeah, I agree. Be a consultant, be there for them.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you're always going to win that way. If you care about them and their business, you're going to do a lot better than any hard sales tactic that may have been taught 15, 20, 30 years ago. Well, Derek, thank you for joining the show. If you like Derek, you like us, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a review. That'll help spread the word. We appreciate it. Until next time, thanks for joining the Cheat Code.